In cities around the world, bicycle transportation is becoming more of a norm and even a necessity, but making that option safe and user-friendly also calls for grassroots advocacy. That's the driving force behind the Boston Bicyclists Union. It's also the force behind a ride, walk, and rally taking place on Sunday. To tell us what's planned is our guest from the union, the executive director, Becca Wolfson. Thank you very much for being with us, Becca.
Of course, thanks for having me.
First of all, talk about the title for this event. I think it's talking about the World Day of Remembrance. For people who don't know this already, what's it about?
Of course, this is the second year we'll be celebrating, promoting it in the city of Boston, but it's actually a worldwide day that's recognized. So it's a day to remember victims of traffic violence. So that's both folks who've been killed in traffic crashes and those who've been injured. What we see in this line of work is that there's a lot of attention on fatalities, but injuries also have serious implications on people's lives. And so it's a day to call attention to the fact that these are preventable crashes and instances in most applications, and that there is a lot of work that we can do both as advocates and that our municipalities can do to make our streets safer.
Well, the danger is still out there, but one thing that has definitely changed in Boston is, and I've seen this in two different mayoral administrations, officials are taking this a lot more seriously when they plan transportation. So talk about the importance of just this visible grassroots constituency to make that happen, at least to help make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. In our almost 6 years as an organization, we've been very focused on street safety. And a few years back, we partnered with the City of Boston and the Boston Police Department to call attention to crash data and the fact that the City of Boston didn't have the best method for collecting and analyzing and looking at crash data, specifically with bicyclists. And so the City of Boston transitioned their data collection and started actually analyzing it and looking at patterns and things to try to change the infrastructure in more deliberate ways to make cyclists safer. And we really appreciate that shift, and it's been great to be a part of that. There are a couple of projects that have come out of that, and it really sort of set the ground for the City of Boston being able to adopt Vision Zero, which is a policy that, again, basically says crashes are preventable, and we should work as a municipality across departments through many different types of interventions and analyses to work towards zero traffic fatalities on our streets.
Well, two of the problems we keep hearing about over and over again are the dooring problems. Someone's driving a bike and a driver comes out of the car and opens the door. And the other problem, and this is the really scary thing, is when you have large vehicles making a turn, especially trailer trucks. What can you do about those things through Vision Zero?
Yeah, absolutely. The first piece is recognizing that these are the most prevalent types of crashes and problems. Between 2012 and to the current day, of the fatal crashes involving bikes in the Boston region, I believe we're at a count now of 8 of 15 of those fatalities have been large trucks or buses. And we know that trucks and buses have large blind spots. And so there are things that can be done to the trucks, to actually, their infrastructure to make cyclists safer. In the case of an incident, there's something called a side guard that goes between the front and rear wheels, that if a truck is turning and there is a crash and impact, rather than getting dragged under, a cyclist or pedestrian will be deflected. And the chances of surviving a type of crash like that are astronomically better if a truck does have side guards. Infrastructure is another huge thing that will help with both. We advocate for separated bike infrastructure. So that means that there's some type of physical separation between moving vehicles and the cyclist, whether it's a parked car and that's a parking protected bike lane, or some other type of physical separation like a curb or bollards or some sort of flexible post. With turning vehicles, you create some distance so that they're better sight lines. So if a cyclist is riding straight and a car or a truck is turning, rather than sort of turning at an angle, they're turning at a 90-degree angle where you have better visibility. And I think in practice, it's a lot easier to sort of see that difference that the infrastructure can make.
We're talking with Becca Wolfson from the Boston Cyclists Union. I know on Commonwealth Avenue we've had bike lanes, those painted lines on the pavement for a number of years. We still had some problems, and now, as you mentioned, we're going to have a protected lane. The work has just started on that, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and this is a project that we're really excited for. There's a groundswell of advocacy, both from the BU Bikes, from us, the Cyclists Union, partnered with some of our other advocacy organizations, with Mass Bike, with Livable Streets, and Walk Boston, walking advocates, bike advocates, really partnered together when the city of Boston was planning on redesigning the road, but keeping it with just regular bike lanes. And when you look at crash data, again, data tells us a lot. Of all of the crashes on Comm Ave, in which there were numerous crashes, most of those were dooring crashes. And again, that's when someone in a car parks, opens the door, and hits a cyclist. And you have that when, the space provided for bikes is a painted lane next to parked cars. It's just sort of an inevitable conflict. And that's why we need to shift the parked cars and provide separation so that, even if a passenger door opens, if there's an impact, you're not being thrown into a travel lane, potentially under a moving car, which, we've had too many incidents like that. There was one in Cambridge just back in June. After a dooring incident, a woman biking was run over by a landscape truck. And so when we can change that infrastructure, we should. And we're grateful that the City of Boston's moving forward with this project. So there'll be parked cars, a bike lane that's separated with a curb, and then pedestrian space on the sidewalk.
Well, I want to ask you about the petition drive. This is in support of the Vision Zero. Explain how that works.
So, the City of Boston adopted Vision Zero. They're moving forward with a few great projects. There's one on Mass Ave right now. The city's installing protected bike lanes. Granted, there's, some distress in the community right now. During the construction process, it hasn't been quite smooth enough. Cars aren't getting used to the infrastructure just yet. We're hoping there's a short learning curve and that improves, but if not, we'll be calling for some other changes. But again, they've committed to Vision Zero. The City of Boston did push for lowering of the speed limit, which had to happen through statewide legislation. The city advocated for that. It's fantastic. Boston, Cambridge, and Somerville are all adopting a lower speed limit, so a default from 30 to 25. But there's some things that we wish were happening faster. With these signature projects on Comm Ave, on Mass Ave, there just isn't enough protected bike infrastructure and low stress ways for people, who are somewhat comfortable riding a bike in the city, but really would be more comfortable if they were further away from moving cars, from fast moving cars. And so we have a petition out asking the mayor, asking the city to commit to doing more with Vision Zero.
Well, another way to show support for this, of course, is to take place in the ride. He's going to take part in the ride, in the rally on Sunday. So explain a little bit about what you've got planned for that.
Yeah, so for the World Day of Remembrance, which is Sunday, November 20th, we're inviting folks of all modes to join us. We'll be having a bike ride where we're meeting in Copley Square at 12, departing at about 12:15, and going on a couple of mile bike ride for about an hour, arriving back at the Public Garden at Beacon and Charles, where we'll meet with folks who are prepared just to walk up to the State House for a vigil. And again, the point is to call attention to Vision Zero, to traffic fatalities, and to further educate the public and that these are preventable and that they're things that we can do, and to call for action. And one thing that's really unique about the event that we've planned this year, we have a few speakers lined up. One is a gentleman who lost his son in a bike crash. We have a couple of folks from CDC in Chinatown who they lost a toddler this past winter, was struck by an emergency vehicle. Actually, it was a terrible crash. It truly is one that we might call an accident. And the community has been tragically impacted by that crash, not folks who weren't relatives, neighbors, just everyone really feels the impact of a crash. And we also will have someone who was driving a car who struck a pedestrian and is now living with that on their conscience and has connected with the family and with the community and is trying to, better the community and find a way to, sort of seek forgiveness and their own solace after, the impact of being someone who killed someone who was walking while they were driving a bike. So, again, the idea of Vision Zero is to bring people together, to call for positive change, not to pit modes against one another. Our streets should be safe for everyone, people biking, walking, and driving.
We should also mention, Becca, people who want to find out more about the union, you have a place they can go to online for that?
Yeah, absolutely. We have an active website, the bostoncyclistunion.org. We're also very active on Facebook and Twitter, and folks can find us there as well.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Of course, thank you.
Becca Wolfson from the Boston Cyclists Union. We'll have more news in just a moment.